This is The Comics Alternative, episode 221, a look at the January Previews catalog. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And this week we're discussing the January Previews catalog. But before we get into that, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials may be as much as 45% off of the cover price. Sometimes 50% off cover, but often you can find discounts that go higher than that.
That's right, and as this is our monthly previews episode, you can count on finding some most of the comics we talk about at deep discounts as specials or as regular books that get the regular discounts that Derek mentioned.
That's right. You can't go wrong with Discount Comic Book Service, and in fact, every single thing that we're going to be mentioning in this month's previews catalog is going to be at great discounts, so check them out at dcbservice.com. You got to go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs, and after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Well, Andy, here we are, our first regular episode of 2017. How was your holiday?
It was pretty chill. I just hung out, and I get annoyed that here in the South, fireworks are a common celebration of New Year's Eve, and so we had to keep the dogs calm while that was going on all night, but otherwise it's been good.
We have that here in Texas as well, but I went to bed early last night because I was just exhausted from a long drive, and I don't remember hearing anything.
Well, good for you.
Unlike apparently your dogs.
Or us, yeah.
Or you, yeah.
Anyway, but people want to celebrate. So other than not hearing fireworks and being exhausted, did you have a good holiday?
Yeah, it was okay. It was a lot of family things involved and family responsibilities in ways that aren't necessarily holiday related. So it was different for me, but I did overall have a good time being with family and doing the family side of our gathering.
Yep.
That I guess is holiday related.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were mentioning that a lot of people like to celebrate the new year by setting off fireworks and bothering others, canine and otherwise. But one way that I like to celebrate a new year is by thanking new patrons of ours. And we do have a couple of brand new Patreon patrons for 2017.
That's great.
And we have one, Ala Rull, is now an official podcast patron of the Comics Alternative, and he has chosen to support us for $3 a month. And as we say on our Patreon page, if you choose to support us with $3 or more per month, then you become an official podcast patron. and you get mentioned on the show occasionally, and you get your name up on our website as an official Comics Alternative podcast patron. So now Alla joins the noble ranks of Serge Batzakis, Scott Burfus, Nick Prolix, Christopher Baird, Prathik Thomas, Art Bowser, Daniel White, Christopher Michael, Paul Lai, Salgood Sam, Michael Norhale, Don Witzel, Simon Brilsby, David Campbell, and Rainer Koshnick.
That's great.
So thank you, Alla. We appreciate that. And also we have a new patron who is supporting us for $1 a month, and this is Davis Morgan. And we love those $1 a month supporters. We have a number of people who do this, and now Davis is our latest patron who supports us for $1 a month.
Yeah, thanks, Davis, and thanks, Alla. This is great news that we have these new patrons.
Yes. So if you want to follow in the noble footsteps of Davis and Alla, then definitely check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/comicsalternative. And in fact, let's make this a contest to see how many new patrons we can get in the month of January.
Yeah, let's see how many we can. Do we have a pledge drive going?
I don't know. Maybe we can do that officially. I can get a couple of friends to man telephones.
Yeah,
and we can get.
I used to do that.
Seriously, you did?
Yeah, when you and I were at Purdue. Since the local NPR station was at Purdue University, I would volunteer to man the telephones and during the pledge drive, and our mutual friend Brian Donahue and I did movie reviews on that station for a while.
But you also manned the phone though for that.
Yes.
Did Brian do that as well?
I don't know if Brian did. Brian stopped doing the movie reviews for a while, and my wife Jennifer and I did them. And so the two of us were manning the phones.
Wow. That's dedication.
Or I guess, we were answering phone calls, I guess. Yeah. Manning being too gender specific.
That's right. You were manning and woolmanning.
Mm-hmm.
Any weird stories from answering the phones on those pledge drives?
Not from answering the phones, but I kind of learned that just about everybody who works for National Public Radio has a story about how Garrison Keillor was a jerk to them.
Is it similar to the stories we hear about people talking about Jerry Lewis that sometimes he was difficult to get along with?
I don't know. I think we've seen some of the ways in which Jerry Lewis is. The issue that I've had, and I've had my own experience with Garrison Keillor, is that his folksy persona is nothing like his real personality.
Well, there'll never be a comic book based on Garrison Keillor, and there was on Jerry.
That's true. I would hope there's never going to be a Garrison Keillor comic. We'll see.
On a more positive note, let's get into the January previews catalog. And this is our first preview show of 2017, of course. And in the January previews, before we get to the solicits proper, we have our first look at this year's titles for Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah, that's right. So these have only fairly recently been announced. And, as usual, there's a lot of the same kind of things you can come to expect. DC and Marvel are launching, I guess, big crossovers or something. Their solicits are top secret. for this, but
I hate that. I hate that.
But we'll find out soon enough about those. But I think it's where the independent publishers, the ones that we normally cover on this podcast, shine. A lot of them will be highlighting their latest licensed properties. For example, Dark Horse has got an Avatar comic. IDW is going to have a Star Trek, and Titan has a Doctor Who comic, and so on. But it's some of the others that I find interesting, especially the ones that are going to have original material in them.
Yeah. I know one that I'm looking forward to, and this is one of their gold titles. This is from Image Comics, Scotty Young's I Hate Image.
Yeah. So this looks like it's taking the I Hate Fairyland concept and applying it to a lot of our favorite characters. It says from Image: Saga, The Walking Dead, Savage Dragon, Spawn, Descender, Black Science, Southern Bastards, and others.
So that looks like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and I think it's for me, it's when we get to the like the silver sponsors where you start to see the interesting more independent companies doing stuff. I mean, one of the ones that stands out to me a lot, or in a big way, is Drawn and Quarterly. Drawn and Quarterly has one highlighting their all ages comics that are upcoming, but the other one, which has me really excited, is got is showing a new Guy Delisle comic called Hostage.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And on top of that, a new book called Poppies of Iraq, which is by Bridget Findackley and Louis Trondheim, which is about Findackley's life growing up in Iraq, which is pretty interesting, and could be a new Persepolis that we're looking at there.
Yep. And then along with that, Fantagraphics offering is one of the highlights for me as well. And this is one where they're gonna get a lot of original art. In the solicit reads that that the publisher of the world's greatest cartoonist has pulled out the stops for this year's Free Comic Book Day, commissioning all new exclusive work from the following comics heavyweights. This includes Noah Van Sciver, Simon Hasselman, Jason Egg Pisker, Liz Suburbia, Dash Shaw, Richard Sala, Emil Ferris, and others. So this is going to be a great Free Comic Book Day issue.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of things for kind of everybody to pick up on. If you're looking for the latest developments in the different publishers' superhero universes, you can find that. There's a ton of all ages stuff coming from a lot of different interesting publishers, and then there's a handful of independent things as well for guys like us.
Right. And in fact, one thing worth noting, or another thing worth noting, is that Humanoids is going to be participating in Free Comic Book Day for the very first time. And this is going to be an issue devoted to Jodorowsky and Moebius's The Inkle. And I'm looking forward to this, especially since Edward and I are batting around the idea of doing an upcoming, well, in the next year, I don't know when if we do this, but maybe an episode of our Eurocomic series devoted to either Moebius or to the work of Moebius and Jodorowsky, such as The Inkle. So,
yeah, that's a big chunk of comics to bite off there. So good luck with that, but that's great stuff. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because anybody who's unfamiliar with that important work should really check out that on Free Comic Day as well.
A lot of good stuff, and I hope to be back again at my local shop, Valhalla Games and Comics, for Free Comic Book Day to talk about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I hope to be maybe at a shop if I can get to one, since I don't have a viable comic book shop within an hour and a half of me or so.
Yeah, you haven't had one for a while.
Well, there is one in my town. I won't shop there, but I don't know. I don't want to get too morbid, but the owner just passed away a couple weeks ago, so maybe things will change. That was awful. I feel like an awful person for saying that.
Well, maybe you can help make up for that by telling us about some of your favorite solicits in the regular section of previews. And so we're going to start with Dark Horse, which is where we always start. And where do you begin there?
I don't begin until page 76, so if you have anything earlier than that, go ahead.
Huh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I have a couple of things on 76, but a few things before, and some out of curiosity, some I'm genuinely interested in. And one of the former, I'm mentioning this because of curiosity, is the very first solicit in Dark Horse, and this is on page 56. It is the comic book adaptation of Neil Gaiman's American Gods.
Yeah, and this is adapted by P. Craig Russell, as it says, doing writing and art, and Scott Hampton doing art as well.
Yeah. Now, have you read American Gods?
No, I haven't.
I have not.
I have
either.
it.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I've heard about it, and there's going to be a new television series based on it. I may check this out of curiosity, but this doesn't move me one way or the other.
Yeah, it's a book I've always been meaning to read, and it's very often recommended to me, especially by students, and I'm often surprised to find students who've read it and recommend it to me, and I mention, the author of that writes comics, and they had no idea.
Really?
Yeah. So I think American Gods is a book that has a big cult following amongst younger people. So the TV series will probably do really well, and and maybe this comic adaptation, which seems a long time in coming anyway, will be successful as well.
Yeah. Now this is titled American Gods Shadows. Number 1. So, and it's also a gem of the month.
Yes.
And after that, one that I'm more genuinely interested in is on page 70, if I can get there. And I'm looking at a PDF this month, as I think are you. So I can't easily and quickly flip through as I can with hard copy. Oh, and this one is a new mini-series from Brian Wood, Rebels, These Free and Independent States.
So is it looking like Rebels may be a kind of following in the Hellboy model of being a series of mini-series and then graphic novel collections, rather than, say, a regular ongoing sequentially numbered series?
It seems like it's something like that. I thought that there was just that original Rebels limited series and that was it. But apparently Wood has decided to carry on in these historically anchored narratives. This one is taking place in 1894, whereas
1794.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
1794.
No, that's jumping ahead a little too far. But if the original Rebels took place during the Revolutionary War period, this is in the early days of the Republic. It begins in 1794, and the beginnings of the America that we have come to know and love, that we may not have for very much longer.
Yeah, and from the looks of this solicit, Dark Horse and Brian Wood seem to be looking to cash in on, or getting some of that sweet Hamilton cash that's out there. Since Alexander Hamilton is featured prominently in the sample page that we have.
That's right. So I'm interested in this. One thing I find curious about this solicit, though, is it says from best-selling writer Brian Wood, and then parenthetically they list The Massive, DMZ, Northlanders. What's conspicuously absent? Briggsland.
Yeah.
Which is the big Brian Wood Dark Horse title right now.
Yeah, that's true. And that's going to be part of their free comic book day offering as well, probably to coincide with maybe the TV series starting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then after that, I go 2 more pages into 72, and this is the Once and Future Queen, number 1 of 5. This is written by Adam P. Nave and DJ Kirkbride with art by Nick Brokenshire. It seems like an interesting premise. The solicit reads, it's out with the old myths and in with the new, as a 19-year-old chess prodigy pulls Excalibur from a stone and becomes queen. Now, magic, romance, fae, Merlin, and more await her. Lend her your axe as the creators of Amelia Cole start a new age of adventure. So if you're a fan of Amelia Cole, this may definitely be for you.
Yeah, or if you're interested in retellings of the Arthurian legends, this is here as well.
Exactly. So that looks promising. And then we get to page 76.
Yeah, and so there's 2 things on 76, and I wanted to mention both of them. So the first one is that we are getting a paperback edition of the Mr. X archives, which contain the first 14 issues of the original series and a couple of other things as well. And so those first 14 issues include art by Gilbert and Jaime Hernandez, as well as some of Seth's earliest work, which he has distanced himself from. But I like Mr. X is an important series from that era, which they're now saying here is 30 years ago, which makes me feel old since I bought those comics when they came out. And so it's good to see this in paperback, and it's $25 for 384 pages, and so that's a really good deal. Yeah,
it is. It's been a while since the original hardbound collection, which I have, but this has been out of print for a long time, and so if you missed out on the original collection, now you can get it in paperback for a more affordable price.
Yeah, and I hope this means that maybe we'll see more of these archives. I mean, most of Mr. X has been collected anyway, but to get these kind of concentrated archives, since this is all of volume 1 in one book, I'd like to see some of the other stuff show up as well, especially those things that are out of print.
But you're right. There's a second thing on page 76 as well worth mentioning.
Yeah, and so this is a Jerry and the Joker Adventures in Comic Art, which is what is described as an art-infused memoir by the late Jerry Robinson, who at a very, very young age went to work for basically as a ghost for Bob Kane on the Batman books, and is partially responsible for the creation of the Joker, among other important Batman elements.
So this looks like to be a nice hardbound edition as well.
Yeah, and Jerry Robinson had a fascinating life and in and out of comics, and he lived to a very old age. I mean, I got to meet him at Heroes Con one of the first years I went. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, he died not too long ago.
Right.
About, what, 3 years ago? 3.5, something like that?
Yeah.
Do you have anything else in Dark Horse?
Yeah, I go to the next page.
I thought you might.
Because we're getting here on page 77, a new collection, actually the first time this has been collected, and this version has been collected, of Mike Grell's Starslayer, which is one of the key books to kind of come out of the early days of independent comics in the 80s. Starslayer was first published by Pacific Comics, I think for the first 6 issues or so, and then later picked up by First Comics. But the Pacific issues were all written and drawn by Mike Grell. The later stuff had other writers and artists on it. But then years later, I think into the 90s, Mike Grell redid the series as a kind of director's cut, and that was published as single issues by the Windjammer imprint that was at Valiant. And so this collects that director's cut version, along with, it says, a lot of extras, sketches, and commentary from Mike Grell. Now, did you read Starslayer when it first came out?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I did. Mm-hmm. Of course, because I'm a big Mike Grell fan, and one of the highlights this year of Heroes Con was getting to meet Mike Grell and actually getting a sketch from him. John Sable Freelance is one of my all-time favorite comic series, and Starslayer is a fun series. It's the basic premise is that there's a Celtic warrior who ends up getting transported into the future and fighting on a pirate spaceship. That's a kind of common Mike Grell trope, that the kind of fish out of water who becomes a great warrior for a new culture, a new experience, like in his Warlord series. So fans of Warlord too might find this worth checking out. One of the notable things about the early issues of Starslayer is there's one of the issues contains one of the first appearances, if not the first appearance, of the Rocketeer as a backup story. So there, if you look to collect those first 6 issues, there's one that's kind of wildly more expensive than the others if you're looking for the back issues.
And that's the reason.
Yeah. But anyway, this is a fun series, good science fiction. You get to kind of see what some of the mainstream creators who are making the leap to independent comics in the early 80s were up to, and I think Grell was really one of the pioneers of that era as both a writer and an artist. And it's affordable. Yeah, that's true. It's $25 for 8 issues of comics. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm.
Anything else in Dark Horse?
Nope.
So you're not intrigued by He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, a character guide and world compendium?
That looks, I'm not of the generation for which He-Man was important. I think I miss it by a few years. I know my brother-in-law, who's a few years younger than me, was into He-Man when he was a kid and still has all his action figures. But I was a little probably too old to be playing with action figures, but I think I probably was playing with action figures then still, but just the ones I had from when I was a kid, like the Star Wars ones and Micronauts. Okay, so maybe a Christmas gift for your brother-in-law next year. Yeah. Or I guess this year. Do you have anything else?
Yeah. I don't have anything until we get into DC.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything until Vertigo. So if you have anything before Vertigo?
There's nothing that I'm going to mention that I will get, but I just wanted to, I guess, make an observation. Last year, DC did a lot of the, those titles like Future Quest, Scooby-Doo, things of that sort. Now we have a series of, I guess they're annuals, where they're pairing up this world with DC characters. So, for instance, on page 124, we get Adam Strange and Future Quest. And then on the next one, we get Booster Gold and the Flintstones annual. And so we have things like that. But one thing that I find most interesting is on page 127, they're pairing Suicide Squad and the Banana Splits.
Yeah.
So we got this Hanna-Barbera property. And this is the first time. Now, the others that they're pairing from Hanna-Barbera, like, for instance, the Space Ghost, the Flintstones, and whatnot, we've seen them before, but this is the first time, I guess, DC is going to be doing something with the Banana Splits.
Yeah, that's true. That one did stand out to me as well. When DC first announced these Hanna-Barbera series, I think we mentioned it on a previous show, and I was a little dismissive of them, and I take it back. The Future Quest series, for one thing, is fantastic.
That was one of your honorable mentioned.
Yeah,
2016.
And the Flintstones showed up on a lot of top 10 lists for the end of the year. And it sounds like what the writer Mark Russell is doing on that is doing some pretty kind of biting social satire in it. I know there's one plot line, for example, involves people in Bedrock protesting the Flintstones because they don't honor traditional marriage, which they're monogamous and and so on. And so the idea that there was kind of, before there was monogamy, there was another type of relationship between men and women that was common is a nice little commentary on where we're at today.
Right.
And it sounds like there's other stuff in there that's along those lines. So one of my goals in the new year is to read that Flintstone series. And then Green Lantern and Space Ghost just feels like a no-brainer. Now, what's crazy in that one, though, is each one of these has backup stories. So, for example, the Adam Strange Future Quest also has Top Cat and Batman teaming up, and Booster Gold and Flintstones has a Jetsons backup, and Green Lantern and Space Ghost has a Rough and Ready backup that is written and drawn by Howard Chaykin. And it looks like he's basically making Rough and Ready into dog versions of Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin. Rough and Ready were once the toast of nightclubs, variety shows, late night chat fests, and Broadway. Learn how they became the comedic duo of yesterday before they hit rock bottom today. or maybe Abbott and Costello in there as well.
Yeah, now see, unlike you, when they announced the Hanna-Barbera line, I didn't dismiss it, but it wasn't that much different. I kind of ignored it. Yeah. So, but at least you gave Future Quest a try. See, I didn't give any of them a try, but I've heard pretty good things about some of these titles. Yeah. I may go back to check these out when I get the time, if that ever occurs in my life, at some point. But I am intrigued by these annuals, and so now you mentioned the backup stories. That is one reason, but also these pairings I find curious. But again, the one that strikes my attention most is the Suicide Squad Banana Splits, and just because it's the Banana Splits. And, we grew up loving the Banana Splits, or at least watching them, whether we loved them or not is another issue. And, as with the other Hanna-Barbera properties, they don't look like the Hanna-Barbera that we grew up with. And so on this image that we have on the solicit on page 127, the splits look more like animals than they do people in outfits. So I'm curious how that will turn out. It's interesting that I see this because I had a curious Banana Splits moment in class a few weeks ago. I do not know, I cannot remember for the life of me how this came up, but we were discussing something in one of my classes. It's like the last week or the penultimate week of class. And someone said something or brought up something that reminded me of the Banana Splits. And I said, oh, well, that's like the Banana Splits. And almost everyone in class looked at me as if, what? A banana split? How does this remind you of an ice cream-based dessert with fruit? And I said, you guys know what the Banana Splits were, right? And no one in class did. And so I said, okay, you're telling me you haven't heard of the Banana Splits at all? Have you heard of the theme? Tra-la-la-la-la. And then they looked at me as I was very strange. And so what I did, I stopped class and brought up on the multimedia cart YouTube and showed them the opening theme of the Banana Splits. And we watched that opening theme in its entirety. It freaked the hell out of them.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I think that probably most of our students would be freaked out by many of the children's programming, much of the children's program we had. I can't imagine showing them HR Puffin stuff or or whatever the other stuff was. Though I think years from now, some of our students who were who were in the Teletubbies when they were kids, since we're getting about at the edge of that particular serious popularity, will become teachers themselves and make references to Teletubbies, and nobody will know what they're talking about, and they'll show them it, and it'll freak them out. So every generation, I think, has some freaky ass children's programming to deal with.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I did bring up the Sid and Marty Krofft stuff. Because after I showed them the opening theme of the Banana Splits, one person in class said, okay, that explains it. And I said, oh, it gets weirder. Let me tell you about H.R. Puffin stuff and Lidsville and the Bugaloos.
Yeah.
No. So
one of the things to mention, though, before we get out of the Hanna-Barbera stuff, is that Suicide Squad Banana Splits has a backup feature, which may be my favorite one. Snagglepuss is a Southern Gothic playwright working with an ensemble cast of cultural figures exploring an intensely creative time in the New York City theater scene in the 1950s. So is Snagglepuss basically Tennessee Williams?
I guess so.
Exit stage right. Oh, man.
Oh.
I didn't do my Snagglepuss voice there.
Yeah. Exit stage right.
that was good.
And then one other thing in DC before we move into Vertigo on page 146, and I'm excited about this. It's a hardcover, Doom Patrol Silver Age Omnibus.
Yeah, that looks like a massive book.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited about it, but I don't know if I'll get it just because before any discounts, this clocks in at $99.99.
But it is everything.
Yeah.
It is over 1,000 pages, and it's every single Doom Patrol story up to issue 124, where, spoiler alert, they get killed. But don't worry, they get better.
Yeah.
Well, most of them get better.
Yeah.
Elastigirl doesn't, unfortunately.
But yeah, that would be nice to get.
Yeah.
But then we move on to the Vertigo section of DC, and on page 152, is this what you were going to highlight?
Yeah. This is the new series that's showing up here, miniseries, first one of 8, Savage Things, written by Justin Jordan with art by Ibrahim Mustafa, who did Ibrahim Mustafa did High Crimes. And so this looks like it's a spy crime series about a secret government organization 25 years ago kidnapped children and trained them to be chaos agents who went on to foment unrest and execute enemies of the state around the world. When these cold and unfeeling creations proved too difficult to control, the powers that be exterminated their kill squad with extreme prejudice. Too bad it didn't work. And then it goes on to let us know that this is going to focus on a character named Abel, who is being employed by the U.S. to stop these chaos agents. So, Justin Jordan does crime and spy stuff really well. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Now, this is his first Vertigo outing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
That's
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that.
Unless he's done some short stories for one of the anthologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is his first series. And it feels like I wonder if we're not seeing kind of the outcome of the critical success, at least, of Sheriff of Babylon. Now this is a much more kind of intensive, less, realistic, maybe spy story, but having these kind of grounded in reality spy and crime stories may be something we'll see more of from Vertigo.
Yeah, so maybe more of the grounded stuff, less of the strange supernatural.
Yeah.
I've only got one other thing in Vertigo. I don't know if you have anything else.
No, I'm done.
Okay, yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is on page 158, and this is the next Fables Deluxe Edition, and this is book number 14. This has to be the penultimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this goes from issue 130 to 140, which means that I guess later this year we're going to get the final deluxe edition that wraps everything up with Fables. And as I've said before, when we've gone through the previews catalog, I'm a big fan of the Vertigo deluxe editions, and especially with the Fables, I'm getting all of them.
Yeah.
So, if we have nothing else in DC Vertigo, let's move on to IDW. Where do you begin in IDW?
I don't begin until into the 200s, so if you have anything before then.
Yeah, I want to mention one or two things, well, actually more than just a couple things before the 200s. On page 187, we get the trade of Jim Thompson's The Killer Inside Me. You and I talked about the first couple of issues of The Killer Inside Me a few months ago on one of our noir crime shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you didn't read all of The Killer Inside Me, you can, in the next few months, get the trade. Jim Thompson's The Killer Inside Me. And then on the next page, 187, this is something, and I think we received a publicity email about this about a week or two ago, because this looks familiar. I don't know if you saw it, but this is Lennon, the New York years, and so this is biographical comics written by David Fonkinos with and also Corbiron, with art by Horn. And I'm not familiar with these creators, but apparently Corbiron and Horn go by just one name.
Yeah.
From the looks of it. And what this does is this narrates the life of John Lennon once he moved to New York City in 1975, where he was kind of settling down into the John Lennon and trying to bring himself together in a way that that eventually came to fruition in the late 70s and especially in the early 1980s, right before he was shot. In other words, the John Lennon that we got with that revival that was so tragically truncated in 1980 and 81.
Mm-hmm. Now, the solicit doesn't say that this is a reprint or a translated book, but from looking at the copyright notice at the bottom of the page, it does seem like this may have been published in France originally in 2010.
Huh. Okay, I didn't notice that. I'm glad you pointed that out. Apparently, I guess it was.
Yeah, because normally I feel like IDW lets us know that, if it's especially if it's something that was successful, and it seems like there's a lot of these biographies of American musicians that were originally done in French, that are coming here. I think that we had a Robert Johnson one a little bit ago, and David Bowie.
So yeah, and as I've said many times on the show, I'm a big Beatles fan, so I would like to check that one out.
Yeah.
And then on page 194...
Actually, before we do that, I forgot. I do have something on 186.
Okay.
Or 189, excuse me, is that the Helena Crash book written by Fabian Wrangel with art by Warwick Johnson Cadwell. Does look interesting. A pulse-pounding, caffeine-fueled, sword-swinging, machine-gun-firing, car-crashing sci-fi adventure comic in a future where coffee is illegal. Helena is a courier delivering black market goods to anyone who can afford her services. When Rojo, a ruthless crime boss, asks her to assassinate his rival, the alien mobster known as White Demon, Helena finds herself in the middle of a gang war. So I think kind of thinking about how, Chew, for example, took place in a future in which chicken was illegal. Here we are getting the possibility in the future, which would be horrible, that coffee would be illegal.
I'm glad you pointed this one out because I remember seeing the cover, but I didn't read the solicit seriously. I think I just glanced at it and then moved on. And I should have read the solicits because now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I mean, I actually skipped over it. I didn't have it in my notes, but I made a mental note to look for it because I had skipped over it initially, but I saw on Facebook Jim Rugg, who we've had on the show, mentioned it as something that he was really looking forward to, and so I wanted to double check on that since I had forgotten it. And then where did you go next?
To 194.
Yeah, then just before we get to that, on 192, there's a solicit here, and this is also something I missed my first time through, which I went through too fast. American Barbarian, the complete series by Tom Scioli. Now, have you read American Barbarian?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it was. I think it was a Monkey Brain book. I may be wrong, but I did read it on. It was a digital Comixology exclusive comic, and so I read it there. And it's Tom Scioli's stuff. Transformers versus G.I. Joe is a blast. The stuff he's doing as backup features in the Young Animal books is amazing, and this is a lot of fun. And one of the things that he really does well is this kind of taking pop culture nostalgia and running with it in really fun and crazy ways. And so this kind of is kind of a reimagining a bit of He-Man.
Okay.
But in a post-apocalyptic zombie cyborg mummy overlord Two-Tank Omen, who is the villain in this that the American Barbarian Merrick is battling. This is the complete Saturday morning epic, it calls it. So yeah, this is fun. That's a fun book. I didn't see that originally, but I'd read it. I read those comics when they originally came out.
Well, on 194, something a little more realistic, I guess, than the American Barbarian, and this is James Albion's Her Bark, Her Bite. And the solicit reads, soon after young artist Rebecca arrives in the big city, she stumbles headlong into the arms of the charismatic Victor. When they fall madly in love, she's thrown into his socialite world of glamorous parties, devoted fans, and layabout debutantes. The people, the art, and the acclaim are exhilarating until Victor's affections start to wander into his new pug, Princess. With her new boyfriend slipping away before her eyes, Rebecca's jealousy and fear threaten to upend everything. Can she hold on to the man she loves? Does she even really want to? And the cover art looks really interesting.
Yeah, I don't. That solicit takes a weird turn there. I'm curious as to what we're talking about with the relationship between Victor and his pug.
Yeah. I'm intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
And you go next where in IDW?
Into we've got on page 201.
Mm-hmm.
The Yo Books section. We're seeing the most recent collection of Weird Love comics called Unlucky in Love.
Mm-hmm.
Along with Weird Love number 17.
Right. So now the next collection of Weird Love comes out later this month, January. Yeah. So I guess in another 3 months we'll get this one, because this is going to be a May release. So more than 3 months, but yeah.
Yeah, about 5 months, yeah. So people can check that out depending on how they like to consume their Weird Love in single issues or in collections.
Yeah, so to speak, how they consume their Weird Love. Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning that if our listeners have not heard our first of the year episode, which is an interview, another one with Craig Yo, then they should check that out. Yeah, because we are starting our year, I guess the 50-year anniversary celebration of Craig Yo in his writings on comics, and we talk about that on the interview. Mm-hmm. And we even have little, 50th anniversary Making Comics History logos on page 201.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that the Weird Love 17 is focused in on what it calls Hot for Teacher special issue. So it's all romance stories in which teachers and students hook up to, various levels of scandal, I guess.
Yep. Don't stand so close to me.
And then below the Yo Book section is the latest edition in the Library of American Comics Essentials series, volume 10, Dan Dunn, Secret Operative 48. And I was struck by this solicit because this is from 1933. This is kind of a little known series. It first appeared as a comic book, and it says considered the first comic book with original material ever produced. 1933's Detective Dan, Secret Op 48 was a landmark. It only lasted one issue, but then it became a newspaper strip, which was the opposite of the way comic books were working back then, where they would be collections of newspaper strips. And it says, at first a blatant copy of Dick Tracy, Dan Dunn quickly developed into an exciting and compelling series starring a rough and tumble Secret Service agent who exacted violent retribution on any criminal who dared cross his path. And this is the first year of comics from that. If you like the Library of American Comics, some of this stuff can get a little pricey, and these Essentials books are a nice way to get kind of a concentrated amount of comic strips for a lower price. Mm-hmm.
Now, have you read any Dan Dunn?
No, this is all new to me, so I'm excited to see this.
Yeah, I noted that as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the next page, though, is something I'm actually pretty excited about, which is Library of American Comics is also doing Volume 1 of Ron Gillard and Gil Kane's Starhawks. And this, I'm a big Gil Kane fan. Hermes Press did a volume of the complete Starhawks some time ago, but they reproduced the comic strips really small, and it's actually kind of hard to read. One of the things that's notable about Starhawks was that it was a daily strip, but it was in a 2-tier format. Most daily strips are, one tier. And in fact, Gil Kane would often draw these strips so that they couldn't be split into single tier comics. They'd usually have long vertical panels as well. And this came out in 77, 78, so it is right on the heels of Star Wars. It's a good strip, so I'm really glad to see that it's getting the high quality Library of American Comics treatment here.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is interesting to note is between these two Library of American Comics volumes, the Essentials here that you mentioned, are the price differences, because you mentioned something about being more affordable, these essential collections. Now, the Dan Dunn is an essential. I guess the Starhawks isn't?
No.
But these books seem to be comparable. In other words, they're both hardcovers. They're both black and white. The Dan Dunn collection is 344 pages. The Starhawks is 320. The dimensions are a little different, but again, roughly comparable. The Dan Dunn is 12 inches by 4.25 inches. The Starhawks, 9.25 by 6.5 inches. But the Starhawks is $49.99 and the Dan Dunn is $29.99.
Yeah. Do you have any of these Essentials books?
No, I don't.
They're really interesting because they are in this squat and really long format, and so there's only one strip per page. It's blown up a little bit from what it would have been in the original single tier comic strip, but it's just one strip per page. So it is, while it is 344 pages, it's going to be actually less content.
I see. Okay, so the sample art we get at the very bottom of page 201 is not representative of what you will find.
I don't think
in
so.
That format.
It isn't representative of the other Essentials books.
Okay.
So I'm guessing what we're seeing down there are what are going to be 6 separate pages.
Right. Okay.
But I'm not sure how they're going to do the Starhawks book. I mean, they could do, I guess if it's 2 years, 77 to 78, it's 300. No, it says 300. Let's see.
320 pages.
This first of 3 volumes reprints more than 300 double-sized strips. So it is also going to be one strip per page.
So they are comparable.
Well, I guess, but Starhawks was twice as big.
Yeah,
in each individual strip. Yeah. So I'm not sure, but anyways, Starhawks was. So there's going to be 3 volumes of this. I am definitely getting that, even though I have Starhawks in many forms, because not only do I have the Hermes Press book, but Starhawks in the 70s was also republished in mass market sized paperback books, the way a lot of comic strips were. And there the panels are all switched up, and I think it reads, even though it's a mass market sized paperback, it reads horizontally. So you get the cover that's vertical, then you open the book and you got to flip it on its side. I may be misremembering that, but I don't have it handy. So that's it for me in IDW.
Okay, well, after IDW, we move on to the image section, and as we often find in Image, they have a lot of number ones. But actually, this month, the Image section starts off not with a number one issue of a new series or miniseries, but with an original graphic novel.
Yeah.
And this is Afar, written by Lila Del Duca with art by Kit Seaton. You interested in getting this?
Yeah, it looks interesting. We on the cover we have an African American protagonist. So that I think is interesting on its own, but it also as it says, in a fantastical post-industrial desert, 15-year-old Bodima suddenly develops the ability to astral project to other planets while she sleeps. When she accidentally gets a young man hurt on a planet light years away, she must figure out a way to project back to save him, and so on. So I think this has a lot of different elements to it, fantasy and science fiction and so on, that I think could be really interesting.
Right. And the art, Seaton's art, which I guess this will be the cover, looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Lila Del Duca does the art on Shudder.
Right.
And I think I stopped reading Shudder after the second issue, not because I didn't like it. It's just, there were other things competing for my attention.
Sure.
But here she is the writer. So it looks interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not a series. It's an original graphic novel. Yeah.
And it clocks in at 168 pages. So it's sizable for, and, yeah. So I'm curious to see that. On the next page, we have something really interesting.
Right, in more ways than one.
Which is a new Jeff Lemire book, new Jeff Lemire series, Royal City, which he's writing and drawing.
Right. And by the way, this is not based on where I live.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Although that'd be cool if Lemire decided to write about me in some way.
Yeah, maybe in the future. In the post-apocalyptic future, there will be a city named after you because all that survives is this podcast. And religions are based on it. Okay. But this looks like it's a little bit more grounded in reality. In fact, it seems to maybe be taking place. Well, it says it charts the lives, loves, and losses of a troubled family in a vanishing town across 3 decades. So it looks like it's more realistically grounded, maybe in the way, something like it says it's a return to the literary and thematic territory of Essex County.
Right.
I'm interested to see how this goes. I mean, Jeff Lemire is incredibly prolific. He's got a new graphic novel coming out in 2017 that he's written and drawn, plus this series, plus all the stuff that he's
right. Descender,
writing,
AD, this is notable for a variety of reasons. I think first and foremost is that this is something that he is writing and illustrating.
Right.
And lately we've been getting work from him where he does one or the other.
Right.
And so this is notable for that reason. I think it's also notable in that, as you pointed out, this is much more realistically based, like the stuff that we find in the Essex County trilogy. And it's been a long time since we've had anything like that from Lemire.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like the other things that he's done. Trillium, Sweet Tooth, most recently AD. But I miss the more realistically based stuff. And so I think that this new series is notable for that reason as well. And in fact, this is not the only creator where this is a phenomena. where they're coming out with something new that is much more grounded in reality and not in any kind of fantastical genre. And we'll get to that other one eventually.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Royal City #1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the next page we have Extremity #1, which is a new series by Daniel Warren Johnson of Space Mullet, with colors by Mike Spicer. So Daniel Warren Johnson looks like is writing and drawing this, and it is listed as, offered again, King City and the Manhattan projects, neither of which is a Daniel Warren Johnson book. So I'm assuming that what we're getting with Extremity is something in the mode of those works. And just from looking at this cover, which is a double spread here, front and back cover, single image, it does give me a Brandon Graham vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I'm curious about that.
Now, have you read any Space Mullet?
No, I haven't, but I've heard good things about it.
It's good. Sean and I discussed the Space Mullet a while back on our webcomic series. And I can't remember if it was Image or Dark Horse, but it may be Image, that came out with the first volume of Space Mullet. Or maybe it was Dark Horse. I can't remember which. So it's good to see that he is getting more attention now with his new series, Extremity. Something beyond webcomics.
Yeah.
And we have some sample art on page 209.
Yeah, 4 pages of sample art. So
yeah.
Looks good. Looks good.
Yeah, 4 pages concentrated on one, because if you want, bigger art, then you should get the Image Plus magazine, which is no longer free with previews.
Right.
Which reminds me, we didn't get any sample art with the Royal City solicit.
Yep.
Yeah. And then on page 210, we have a solicit for Rat Queens #1. I know a lot of people had been wondering if Rat Queens was ever going to be coming back, and it is, but they're rebooting, I guess.
Yeah, or a new, I guess, Rat Queens Volume 2, maybe, with a new artist, Owen, I'm going to say Genie.
I guess. Gieni.
Yeah. So we've talked about Rat Queens before. It's good.
It's a fun title, and I guess they're calling this in the solicit a soft reboot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you haven't caught Rat Queens before, this will be a good jumping on point.
And on 211, we do have sample art.
Yep.
And the next solicit on 212 is from a creator that you and I have talked about frequently on the show, Ray Fox. This is Underwinter #1.
Yeah, which is described as a horror series, a twisted portrait of our dark world, beginning with the perverse topical symphony, a beautifully painted tale of music and cruelty in the modern age. So, it sounds like maybe this is going to be an anthology series of some kind, just kind of Ray Fox doing horror stories. That'll be, and he's writing and drawing it, and his art is beautiful. I was a fan of Intersect. I know a lot of people scratched their head at it, and I did too. But it was just a really immersive book.
It was intriguing, yeah. It was challenging,
right? And so I'm curious to see what he does with this series.
Well, I think we should get Ray Fox on the podcast for an interview, and I know he's up for it. I talked to him at Heroes Con, and I asked if he had a few moments just for a brief, like 5-7 minute conversation at his table. But he was busy with a couple of commissions, and he said, but, he's familiar with our podcast. He knew you, and he said, no, I want to be on the show. Why don't we do it in a more formal way later on?
Yeah. I've talked to him about this too. And in fact, the first year I did the Sumter Comic Art Symposium here at my school, he was one of the guests we had, and I got to hang out with him for a couple days, and he was great. So yeah, I'd love to have him on the show.
Yeah. So we ought to pursue that.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you have?
Now we have to do it. You've put it on the air. It's out there.
Yeah.
I go to 249. So I don't know if you have anything before then.
Well, actually, I have one thing before. I have something on 249, and maybe the same thing. But before 249, on page 240, is Sex Criminals number 17. And I know that they've done this a number of times in the past, and I usually haven't highlighted the bagged variant XXX cover. I think I noted it when the Hernandez brothers did it.
Right.
But I want to note this one because for Sex Criminals number 17 XXX cover variant, it's by Gina Winbrandt.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see that happening too.
Yes. And for listeners, if that name doesn't ring a bell, then try to remember back a few months ago on one of our interview shows, Andy and I spoke with Gina, as well as a couple of other 2D cloud creators. This was right around the time that her book, Someone Please Have Sex With Me, came out. And she's a blast. She was fun to talk with on the podcast. I've talked with her a couple of times at SPX. She's got a great sense of humor, and she is someone who would be perfect to do a variant cover for Sex Criminals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been buying those issues with the variant cover. But I have yet to actually open one of them. I really need to do that, but I'm not saving them in the bag for some kind of collector thing. I just haven't gotten around to them. Now that Volume 3's trade is out, I may just go get that.
Yeah. I've gotten some of them. I think maybe just a couple. Maybe I should have been getting all of them along the way, but
yeah.
Okay, so now we go to page 249.
Yeah, and the only thing on page 249 is the complete phonogram. So this gives all 3 phonogram miniseries by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McElvey, Rue Britannia, The Singles Club, and The Immaterial Girl, with new color for Rue Britannia. This is a great series. I really enjoyed it. So, or all the 3 miniseries. So, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and if you didn't get those earlier collections, then hey, you're in luck. You have a really nice hardbound collection of all the phonogram.
Yeah, and it clocks in at 504 pages. But anybody who kind of got into Gillen and McElvey because of The Wicked and the Divine will want to check out this earlier work.
Yeah, with the first 2 volumes, that came first.
Yep.
And that's all I have in Image. Yeah.
So I go to the back half of the catalog. And where do you start back there?
Let me see. I go to page 268. Do you have anything before that?
No, that's where I go.
Okay. Is it the Abrams selection?
It is.
Yes, the Best We Could Do, an illustrated memoir, and this is by, and I'm not sure how you pronounce the name, Thi Bui? Maybe. Thibui. Mm-hmm. It says, an intimate and poignant graphic novel portraying one family's journey from war-torn Vietnam from debut author Thi Bui, exploring the anguish of immigration and the lasting effects that displacement has on a child and her family. Bui documents the story of her family's daring escape after the fall of South Vietnam in the 1970s and the difficulties they faced building new lives for themselves in the United States.
Yeah, this I'm really interested in. I'll definitely be checking it out, and it seems to come on the heels of another autobiographical comic about Vietnam and immigration to the United States, and I can't remember what that was.
That's right. Yeah, I thought I remembered another one, or vaguely remembered.
And then there's Viet America, which is a great autobiographical comic about this same subject too. So this I think, along with what we saw with the Drawn and Quarterly Free Comic Book Day solicitation, the kind of stories about growing up in the Middle East are popular now as autobiographical comics, and we're seeing a little trend here in Vietnam, which I think is really interesting, because I would guess then, with that, that era of the mid 1970s when this immigration was taking place, those people are now in their, if they came as children, are now in their 40s, right? So it's interesting that we're seeing this development.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And Abrams ComicArts always does really, really good books.
Yes.
Where do you go after that?
310 is where I have my next stuff. So
okay,
if you have anything before that, go ahead.
Yes, I have something on 288, and this is from Amulet Books, Nathan Hale's One Trick Pony.
Yeah.
Have you read any of the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tale books?
No, but I remember when you had him on the show, and I've been intrigued by those. Yeah.
He great stuff, great introductions to history, and in fact, I remember Nathan Hale and the Alamo All-Stars was one of Andy Wolverton's, I can't remember if it was Gwen's as well, best books for young readers from last year. And I only know, and I haven't read all of Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tale books, but I've read a number of them. But those kind of books are the only things I've read from Nathan Hale, and I haven't been aware of anything he's done outside of the Hazardous Tale stories, the histories. But right. This seems to be something very new, at least for me, something outside of the Hazardous Tale series. One Trick Pony, it says, the aliens have arrived, and they're hungry for electricity. In the Earth of the future, humans are on the run from an alien force, giant blobs who suck up electrical devices whenever they can find them. Strata and her family are part of a caravan of digital rescuers hoping to keep the memory of civilization alive by saving electronics wherever they can. Many humans have reverted to pre-electrical age, and others have taken advantage of the invasion to become dangerous bandits and outlaws. When Strata and her brother are separated from the caravan, they must rely on a particularly beautiful and rare robot pony to escape the outlaws and aliens and defeat the invaders once and for all. So this sounds fun, and I'm hoping it's something that they will tackle on a future Young Readers episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's on page 288. And then if I go a few pages ahead into the Archie section, I want to point out, I don't know if I'll probably get this variant just because it's from Jaime Hernandez, but we've got some new Archie comics coming out, and one of them that's solicited in the January previews is the one-shot The Archies, based on the band, and Jaime Hernandez does one of the covers.
Yeah, that's a pretty cover. So
it is.
That does look good. In fact, there's a series of Archie one-shots coming out in this issue of previews.
Right. So, but I will probably get the one that Jaime does, just because, I mean, it looks like a Love and Rockets image.
Yeah, it does.
With the band.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you say you go to page what?
310.
Okay. I have one thing before that, and this is on 303. Providence, issue number 12, is coming out. If you recall, in 2015, Providence was one of my favorite titles of that year, and we finally have the final issue of that coming out. So
yeah.
This is Alan Moore and Jason Burrows' Providence.
Yeah, I've only read the first issue of this, but I liked it. But, I will definitely get this when it's collected.
Mm-hmm. So that's something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. And then on 310, you have...
So 310 is Big Planet Retrofit.
Mm-hmm.
And it lists I Thought You Hated Me by Mary Naomi. Now, has this been solicited before?
I don't think so, but this book came out back in the fall. It came out right around the time that you and I had Mary Naomi on for that aforementioned 2D Cloud interview. Mm-hmm. But I have talked with Jared at Big Planet, and he says that there's something about previews where they solicit the titles after they've been released by Big Planet Retrofit. For whatever reason.
Yeah, so we've already read this.
We've already read it.
And we liked it.
We liked it, yes. And so we strongly recommend it. This is, we read it within the context of other works from Mary Naomi. But even if you don't know any of her stuff, you could definitely appreciate this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and if you do know her stuff, it's a book about this long-term friendship she has, but it's really interesting how it kind of fits into the cracks of some of her earlier works.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it's from Big Planet Retrofit, and as we've said multiple times on this podcast, anything that they do is worth checking out.
Yeah.
One of our favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I go to Boom.
Yeah. And so I am on page 313.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Grass Kings, written by Matt Kint and illustrated by Tyler Jenkins. Matt Kint, who we talk about a lot, who's an incredibly prolific writer, and Tyler Jenkins, who's the artist on Peter Panzerfaust. And so in this story, eldest brother Robert leads a grief-stricken life, having lost his daughter to a tragic accident, followed by his wife disappearing one morning, never to return. I should back up a second. The Grass Kings chronicles the tragic lives of the Grass Kings, who are three brothers and rulers of a trailer park kingdom. A fiefdom of the hopeless and lost, of the desperate poor seeking a promised land.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the art looks beautiful that we get samples of.
Exactly. Earlier when we were discussing Royal City #1, I mentioned that one of the things that's notable about that is that you have Jeff Lemire returning to a more realistically based narrative. And I said that there's at least one other title in this issue that I feel the same way, and that's Grass Kings #1. We get a lot of stuff from Matt Kint. Matt Kint seems to be all over the place. In many ways, kind of like Jeff Lemire, right? As you mentioned earlier. And he's with a variety of different publishers as well. But most of the stuff that we get from Matt seems to be more genre-based, But this stands out as something different. And so I'm really looking forward to Grass Kings.
Yeah.
And this is another interview possibility because we both have talked with Matt Kent in the past at Heroes Con about having him on the show, and he says, yeah, I'm up for it. And we keep putting it off, thinking that his next thing would be an opportunity for us to invite him on the Comics Alternative. We should jump at this.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk to him about a lot of other things as well, but use Grass Kings #1 as a springboard.
Okay.
Do you have anything else in Boom?
No, I don't.
Because I have one other thing to mention, or at least one. No, I guess a couple of other things. But one is on page 318, and this is Strange Fruit, the collection. And remember back when this issue #1 of Strange Fruit came out about, a year and a half ago?
Mm-hmm.
It got a lot of press, and you and I did we review Strange Fruit #1?
I didn't.
Okay.
You may have done it with somebody else. But.
No, I don't think so. But I think you and I did talk about the possibility of discussing Strange Fruit when it's collected, as a single, collected work. And now we have, or we will soon have, the opportunity to do this. This is written by Mark Waid with art by J.G. Jones. And I remember one of the reasons why we wanted to wait until the collection came out, if we were going to review this, is that there were some objections to issue #1 of Strange Fruit that, at least to me, seemed to be based on an incomplete story. In other words, I was wondering if some of those concerns may have been addressed once the story was complete. That you wouldn't have the same kind of objections once you saw the story in its entirety. So this may be an opportunity for us to take a look at this book when it comes out.
Maybe. That's one thing I don't want to commit to, because I did feel kind of turned off enough by that first issue not to follow up with it later on. So I've kind of mixed feelings about discussing this on the show, especially if it turns out to be a negative thing.
Well, we could get an early review copy and see if it would suit our purposes, and then go from there.
Yeah.
On the next page, on 319, there's something here that seems interesting, although it's a second volume of something that I'm not familiar with. And this is The March of the Crabs. This is by Arthur Dupin.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with March of the Crabs Volume 1?
No. But it seems like Boom or Archaea, I guess, maybe.
Right.
Put it out originally. Yeah. So it's a French translation.
Yeah. It says, originally published in French. It's the second of 3 volumes of the Eisner Award-nominated adventure from critically acclaimed illustrator and animator Arthur Dupin. But I'm not familiar with the first one. I don't remember even seeing it or hearing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may have been one of those books that showed up in the Eisner Awards under maybe one of the young adult or the younger readers categories that I just kind of glossed over because I wasn't familiar with it.
But then that's all I have in Boom.
Yeah. And I don't have anything till Dynamite. So if you have anything before Dynamite, go ahead.
On 335, this is under Candlewick Press. This is, I guess you pronounce it Yvain, Yvain. So Yvain, the Night of the Lion. And this is written by M.T. Anderson with art by Andrea Offerman. It says, in his first graphic novel, National Book National Book Award winner M.T. Anderson turns to Arthurian lore with captivating art by Andrea Offerman, bringing the classic legend to life. So, this is yet another title in this month's previews that refers to Arthur. Eager for glory and heedless of others, Sir Yvain sets out from King Arthur's court to defeat a local lord in battle, unknowingly intertwining his future with the lives of two compelling women, Lady Laudaine and the beautiful widow of the fallen lord, and the sly maid Lunette. And then it goes on from there. So this seems interesting, and I know that Candlewick Press does a lot of really good books for younger readers, and Candlewick books are things that both Andy and Gwen have talked about a couple of times at least on past issues of the Young Reader series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the solicit mentions that this is an interpretation of the poem, the epic poem by Chrétien de Troyes. So I'm not sure what that interpretation means instead of adaptation. But we'll see what that looks like.
And then after that, I go to Dynamite.
Okay. And so Dynamite, where do you start with Dynamite?
On 348 and 49.
Okay. So I'm on 341 because we're getting a new James Bond series once again. And so the previous 12 issues were two arcs basically by Warren Ellis, and then we had the 6-issue Hammerhead miniseries by Andy Diggle, and now Benjamin Percy is coming on as the regular writer on the James Bond series. Ben Percy is a novelist who's now more recently gotten into comics. He writes Green Arrow for DC. And so I'm looking forward to. I've been enjoying these James Bond comics a lot, so I'm looking forward to this series. Him taking over.
Yeah, I like what I've read. I just haven't read much of it. The Dynamite James Bond.
Yeah. I've been reading all. I've read all of it, and so I think they're doing a good job with it.
Well, maybe I had to read them as collections since I'm so behind.
Yeah, I think they'd read well as collections. I think they'd read in interesting ways as collections because, especially the Ellis stuff, because he was doing a lot with pacing, and there were a lot of the action scenes, for example, had no dialogue and would go on for multiple pages. So reading an individual issue you could do it in like 5 minutes. But I think maybe getting a full sense of what he's trying to do with those action scenes in a larger collection would maybe be more effective. Okay, so where do you go?
Well, I'm sure that in the Dynamite section you go next to Charmed #1, right?
Yeah, Charmed is outside of my also my pop culture experiences, so I missed out on that.
Yeah. But on pages 348 and 349, we find a solicit for Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, The Big Lie, #1. And what I find so intriguing about this is that the creators, and we have as writer Anthony Del Cole and artist Werther Del Adrea, they take Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and they turn them into kind of a hard-boiled noir story. The solicit reads, when the teenage brothers Frank and Joe Hardy are accused of the murder of their father, a detective in a small resort town of Bayport, they must team up with the femme fatale Nancy Drew to prove their innocence and find the real guilty party in the process, in a twisting, hard-boiled tale complete with double crosses, deceit, and dames.
Yeah. Who is asking for a film noir version of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew.
Well, who was asking for reinterpretations of the Hanna-Barbera properties?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Remember, you said something about being dismissive of that about a year ago?
That's true. Hardy Boys was my thing when I was a kid. I mean, I ate up all those books. And so I feel like I have a little more of maybe a protective sense of that, especially seeing as how this starts out with the Hardy Boys' father getting murdered. That may be too much for my taste, even though I'm a big noir fan. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe what you're saying is right, and this could even be inspired by that Hanna-Barbera, update to take beloved childhood pop culture properties and adultify them.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe a better example of something like this is what Archie did with Afterlife with Archie.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
Or even the regular Archie series.
Has
done that too. Yeah.
Oh,
good point.
Yeah. So we'll see. We pointed out during our 2-part crime comic series that we could easily continue that series if we wanted to because of all the crime comics that are coming out.
Sure.
And that's just another example.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
I go next to Drawn and Quarterly, if you have something before that.
No, that's where I go to, so that's 367.
Mm-hmm. And there are 2 new titles from Drawn and Quarterly, both of which are definitely worth looking at and possibly discussing on the podcast, if not interviewing the creators. Another interview possibility, especially with Michael DeForge. Now, I spoke with him not last year at SPX, but the year before, and he said, he's up for being on the show, and to get in touch with him when he has a new book coming out, and he'll be on the show. And he's had a few that's come out since then, and we haven't really followed up, but maybe we can this time. The new Michael DeForge book is Styx Angelica, Folk Hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely noted this too, because Michael DeForge is incredibly prolific. Mm-hmm. So in keeping up with his stuff is difficult, especially also because it comes out from so many different publishers.
Yeah.
But this Drawn and Quarterly is a good home for him, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yep. Yeah, it says Styx Angelica is, in her own words, 49 years old, former Olympian, poet, scholar, sculptor, minister, activist, governor general, entrepreneur, line cook, headmistress, Mountie, columnist, libertarian, cellist. And after a high-profile family scandal, Styx escapes to the woods to live in what would be relative isolation were it not for the many animals that surround and inevitably annoy her. Mm-hmm. So this looks to be fun, as everything from Mike DeForge is. But then underneath that is a new book from Drawn and Quarterly, but it's something that we've read before.
Yeah. Bob Sikoriak's iTunes Terms and Conditions is going to be collected. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I talked to him at CXC, and he gave me the heads up that this was coming out from Drawn and Quarterly. So this is a great book. I had picked it as one of my best of last year, in fact. And Sikoriak actually did. He did a sketch for me in my Blackhawk sketchbook, and he of course did Steve Jobs as Blackhawk after Howard Chaykin, which is great. And rather than holding a gun, Steve Jobs Blackhawk is of course holding an iPhone.
Yeah. And then right beside that is resolicited his Masterpiece Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm waiting for another volume of Masterpiece Comics to come out from Drawn and Quarterly.
Yeah. And so when I saw him at CXE, he had a mini comic that was a preview of the next Masterpiece Comics stuff, and it was great.
Yeah, because he's been coming out with these shorter Masterpiece Comics works. They're just not collected yet.
Right.
But I think that's all of the new stuff in Drawn and Quarterly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else in Drawn and Quarterly, or maybe a better way of putting that, anything before Fantagraphics?
No, just go ahead to Fantagraphics.
Yeah. And, we say this, I think, about every single month. We could spend a good half of each preview show talking about just the stuff that's being solicited from Fantagraphics.
Yes.
And so on pages 374 and 375, we have quite a number of things to discuss. So what stands out for you?
I don't know, everything. You've committed us to a whole bunch of interviews in this episode, but one of them that I've actually looked into is to talk to Josh Bayer about All-Time Comics.
Okay.
Which is their new line of superhero comics, in which Bayer is kind of overseeing superhero comics that are going to be collaborations between indie comic creators and some classic superhero comic creators. So, for example, we're going to see in the first one, Crime Destroyer, the last work of Herb Trimpe, who sadly passed away a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
But Al Milgram's doing some too. Rick Buckler Jr., Rich Buckler's son, is doing some as well. And so I talked to Josh about this at CXC. He said, don't say anything about this. It hasn't been announced yet. But this is going to be a line of basically 6 superhero comics that they're doing, starting with Crime Destroyer. So I said, well, maybe we can talk to you when it comes out. And he said, sure.
I'd love that. Let's do that.
Okay.
So, one thing it's a big takeaway from this episode of the Comics Alternative is we're committing ourselves to a lot of future interviews.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of interviews, someone that we interviewed last year in 2016 has a new book coming out, Bill Shelley. And in fact, he had even told us a little bit about this when we spoke with him last year. And his new book is John Stanley, Giving Life to Little Lulu.
Yeah, that I'm definitely interested in reading that book.
Yeah. And then on the bottom of that page is a new book from Kathy Malkasian, and this is Eartha. I don't know if you're familiar with her Percy Gloom.
No, but I've read Temperance.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
It seems like a lot of great creators have new stuff coming out from Fantagraphics this time around. We've got Noah Van Sciver's got a second volume of Fante Bukowski.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got new issues of Crickets by Sammy Harcum and Ganges by Kevin Huizenga. Both of those are kind of I don't want to say landmarks, but publishing events.
Right.
To see new issues of those series.
Yeah, and the thing that strikes me that's strange about Cricket's number 6 and Ganges number 6 being solicited at the same time, didn't last year Cricket's number 5 and Ganges number 5 come out at the same time or about the same time?
Well, it says in the also available that Cricket's 5 was solicited in December of 2015, and Ganges 5 was solicited in December of 2015. So, yeah.
Sounds right, yeah. I'm sure it's uncoordinated, but it's an interesting coincidence. And then something at the very bottom of that page 375, it says direct market exclusive from Breakdown Press. Remember, I think it was last month that there was a Breakdown Press book that was solicited in the Fantagraphics section, and I said to you, Shay and I reviewed this already, and it's from Breakdown. And so apparently Breakdown has something going on with Fantagraphics, and now they're making it, I guess, clear here. Okay, so after Fantagraphics, what do you have?
I go to 384. So if you have anything before that, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one thing before that, and this is on page 376, and under first, second section, California Dreamin', Cass Elliot Before the Mamas and the Papas. And this is by Penelope Bagu, and this is the same creator who gave us Exquisite Corpse, which I think Andy Wolverton and I discussed about a year and a half ago, maybe on an episode. But this looks interesting. So this is the story of Mama Cass before, as the subtitle says, the Mamas and the Papas.
So we're getting a few popular musician biographies coming out.
Right. And then we get to 384.
And there I have, under House of Anansi Press, another memoir, In Between Days, a memoir about living with cancer by Teva. I'm going to say Teva Harrison. Someone who Teva was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer at the age of 37. So a graphic memoir in the vein of Cancer Vixen and Cancer Made Me a Shallower Person.
Right.
So that's another popular topic amongst graphic memoirists.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Just as I'm looking forward to a book on page 392. Do you have anything before that?
No.
Okay, and this is in the Kodansha section, and this is Ichi F., a worker's graphic memoir of the Fukushima nuclear plant by Kazuto Tetsuta.
Yeah, I skipped over that. That is interesting. I definitely want to check that one out.
Yeah, in fact, maybe that's something that Shay and I can discuss on an upcoming manga show.
Sure.
And where do you go after 392?
I don't have anything till SelfMadeHero on 414.
Yep, that's where I go next.
Okay. And what have you got there?
Maybe the same thing you do. Fun?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to find it. Okay. Yeah. Where am I? Yeah. Fun. Spies, Puzzle Solvers, and a Century of Crosswords by Paolo Basilieri. In December 1913, the New York World newspaper published the first crossword in history. It appeared in their Sunday supplement Fun. A century later, this absorbing puzzle continues to attract and infuriate millions of devotees every day. And so this is basically it sounds like maybe an anthology about different puzzle makers.
Yeah.
That's ardent solvers and intellectual luminaries.
So, yeah, I saw a 2017 catalog from Abrams, and this was in their SelfMadeHero section. Okay. So it does look interesting.
Yeah.
And, I've only got a couple of other things. I mean, there's some editions from both Vertical and Viz that I'm going to be getting, but they're part of ongoing series that we've discussed previously. But I next go to 472.
Okay, before then, just for a second, and 424, Titan is doing a new series based on Kim Newman's Anno Dracula novels. Have you ever read any of these?
Never have.
These are a lot of fun, and they've got a kind of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen quality to them, where Kim Newman is throwing in a bunch of Victorian characters and other pop culture references, and so I'm definitely going to pick up that series. hopefully he'll be playing around with some of the similar things. But the Anno Dracula books are a lot of fun. I would highly recommend them.
I'll didn't know about those. I'll have to check them out on your recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I go to 472 next.
Yeah, on 472 under the W.W. Norton section, we get a new edition, a hardbound edition of Will Eisner's A Contract with God and other Tenement stories. And here we have a new edition because of the 100th anniversary of Eisner's birthday.
Right. So I'm getting the sense that this is probably the first of many of these publications that Norton's going to do.
Yeah. And they don't say so in the solicit, but from the look of the cover, I guess this is going to have, I don't know, maybe a forward or introduction by Scott McCloud.
Yeah. Now,
I wonder why they didn't list that in the solicitation.
Yeah, that is curious. But so for those of us who have multiple copies of A Contract with God, as I do, and in fact I have a hard time giving them up because I think one is in a sepia tone that I have and one is black and white, so I figure those are different enough for me to have two copies. This is probably going to be me getting a third copy, just maybe to read the Scott McCloud introduction.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to get this one as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have before the book section.
Yeah, me too. And so I think we may have the same book in mind.
The League of Regrettable Supervillains?
Yes.
Yes, this is on page 486. And on our recent interview with Craig Yo, we were mentioning to him John Morris's book from about a little more than a year ago, The League of Regrettable Superheroes. So you knew if you waited long enough, John Morris would give us another volume, this one devoted to the villains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is going to get into even more obscure territory than what we saw with the League of Regrettable Heroes, because those heroes may have been featured as their title characters in their own series, whereas these would have been maybe villains who only showed up once.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this because I really enjoyed John's earlier book. And, I had him on the podcast for an interview. It may be worth getting him back on the show. I mean, since we're, committing ourselves to so many interviews on this episode, let's go ahead and go whole hog and get one more. And maybe we can have John on and you can join us this time and talk about the Supervillains book.
Sure.
And that's all I have in the January previews catalog.
Me too. I'm done.
And that's a lot.
Yep.
So plenty of comics that are going to be coming up, and you can find these for great discounts at the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. As Andy and I record this episode, they do not yet have the January sales up, but they will in a few days. We guarantee it, so be sure to check back. And everything we've discussed and we've pointed out on this episode, you can find at great discounts.
That's right.
Yes. And if you want to tell us the kind of things that you're going to be reading or want to read in the months to come, then get in touch with us and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message using SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right, or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com, or you can get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we have our Twitter feed. You can check that out at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right, but you can find us other places on social media such as Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. And, if you want to be smart listeners like our new patrons, Alla Rule and Davis Morgan, especially Alla, who's an official podcast patron of ours, then head on over to patreon.com/comicsalternative and support us. Just for $1 a month. That's cheap.
Yep.
And you'll be helping us out because it does cost to do this, although Andy and I will always make the show free to you guys.
That's right.
That's right. So help support us and get in touch with us. Let us hear from you. Until next week, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.